there's an article by Haaretz that, a liberal Zionist publication, that as it's eulogizing all the fallen Israelis from October 7th, it admits that there are far fewer than what the IDF are proclaiming. And so there's so much footage now showing that, Israel has really overstepped its bounds and exposed itself, because it also has the Hannibal Directive. So you were talking about Israel's strategy. It has a Hannibal Directive, which says that Israel is not really bound to protect the so-called hostages or prisoners of war that have been captured. They don't have any duty to protect them. So oftentimes their number one priority is to just slay, and slaughter on the scene. And that leads to deaths of Israelis themselves. So this is a really ugly scene that, I mean, I don't think anyone could have predicted would have happened now, but I think you may bring up a really good point about the Saudi-Israel normalization process. The timing of this is, to me, ingenious, because Israel has committed these atrocities and is committing an actual genocide right now. And that has absolutely killed this normalization process, probably indefinitely. I mean, that's what Saudi Arabia says. But the situation
they said
does not look good.
They said that it I mean, Saudi Arabia is, they're playing this pretty in an interesting fashion, because they didn't jump on the they didn't do the Bahrain thing. Bahrain just
Right.
One of the first people to normalize relations. Bahrain just shut down diplomatic relations, kicked out the Israeli ambassador, said, "We're done, we're finished." Saudi Arabia could have done that, but in doing that, you take all the leverage out, because I think Saudi Arabia understands that this is the chance to get a Palestinian state, that from this disaster that's taking place, there can be a Palestinian state. So what they said is, not only, they didn't say, we will resume negotiations down the road when this is done, which would have been reasonable. They said, we'll continue talking right now. We'll continue to meet with Israel right now to talk about normalization. But understand, there will never be normalization until there's a Palestinian state. And so they're making the linkage there, so that if Israel knows that if Israel comes to the table and talks to Saudi Arabia, that a state for Palestine, statehood for Palestine, will be part of the negotiation. Israel's really shot itself, not just in the foot, but in the knees, in the hip, in the gut. They've done everything wrong here. They've done nothing right.
Indeed. And perhaps we can return to the military component here, because, the IDF has been championed as one of the strongest militaries in the world. It's almost infallible, given how weaponized it has become, how much U.S. backing it has, and, of course, how much catastrophe and devastation it can cause, which we are seeing right now in the bombardment of Gaza. But you have said earlier and repeatedly on other programs, on X and in your writing, that this is really Israel's undoing. So how is it then that Palestinian resistance, which doesn't have anywhere near the fraction of the backing, Hamas, no matter how many weapons it has and how genius it is nowhere near the so-called military might of the IDF? How is it that they're able to do this? And how is it that it looks like Israel is the one on the brink and not Palestine and its resistance?
Yeah, well, we have to look at a couple things. One, the United States has made it part of our strategy towards Israel to ensure that Israel has has technological, not just superiority, but supremacy, meaning that the weapon systems available to Israel will always far outclass anything that its potential adversaries will have. So we've been, providing Israel with the F-35Is. They're improved to deal with the Israeli way of doing business. We've given them all the bombs they want, these JDAMs, these satellite-guided bombs. We've worked with them to build the Iron Dome anti-missile shield. The Merkava tank and their armored personnel carriers are designed for the modern battlefield, considered to be the best tanks in the world. So it's all this technology that's put to bear. And then Israel also combines that with a very heavy reliance on intelligence, like human intelligence, technical intelligence, etc., to tip things off. And then they have a very aggressive doctrine to go out and try and preempt issues before they happen. They have a handful of units that are pretty good. Sariyat Matkal, the General Reconnaissance Unit. A lot of people say it's the equivalent of Delta Force. Let me just set you guys straight here. Sariyat Matkal is decent, but they're young kids with very little experience. They've got some old seasoned hands in there, but the average age of Delta Force is around 35 years old. These are guys that enlisted when they were 18. And so they've already been in the Army for 20 years. They've gone through Ranger training, Special Forces training. They have a couple combat tours. So they're very mature players by the time they join Delta. Sariyat Matkal isn't anywhere near Delta Force in terms of the quality of their thing. They have legendary status based upon some things they've done, like the Entebbe rescue and things of that nature. But when you read the actual histories of their operational details of Sariyat Matkal's operations, they're not supermen. They make a lot of mistakes. They've suffered horrendous casualties so far in this campaign. The IDF is casualty averse, meaning every army is casualty averse. I mean, it's nobody wants to die, but you accept the risks, meaning that, look at the Taliban. Ask the Taliban when the Taliban spoke about U.S. Marines, they said, we don't like to fight Marines. Why? Because when we shot at the Marines, they ran towards the guns. They came at us and they kept coming towards us till they found who shot them and killed them. And we got tired of running away and dying. Now the Marines suffered casualties because that kind of aggression leads to casualties, but the Marines prevailed. That's how you win the battlefield, by being aggressive. The Israelis have removed aggression from that. Their forces are very passive. Plus, again, a Marine, 13 weeks of basic training, another dozen weeks of advanced individual training. Then you join the unit, your battalion. You're going to get 6 to 8 months of welcome aboard, then 6 more months of pre-deployment training, and then you're going to deploy. But when you deploy in that battalion, you may be the rookie, but you're surrounded by a unit with guys that have been in for 3, 4, 5, 10, 15 years. We've done multiple tours, so it's a very combat hardened unit, a combat capable unit. Your Israeli battalion is composed exclusively, with the exception of some NCOs and senior officers, of conscripts, guys that are in for 2.5 years. You can't be a good soldier in 2.5 years. You can't be. You can't. It can't happen. You can't be a good combat team in 2.5 years. And that's the entire Israeli military. Again, with the exception of some NCOs and some officers. Your average Israeli is a 18, 19, 20-year-old kid who, they aren't combat hardened. The Israelis are very technological. Their military isn't designed to, attract, the toughest and the roughest. Who's the smartest guy here? How can we outsmart the enemy? None of them want to die. Nobody wants to die, but none of them are out there saying, to the guns, to the guns, to the guns. That's why Hamas did so well against the Golani Brigade, the elite infantry unit, 13th and 51st Battalion, slapped around. These Israeli forces, they're going to make a lot of mistakes. They haven't been training to do the fighting that they've been doing. They don't spend a lot of time in the field wearing 70 pounds of personal protective gear. They don't run around, and they're not hard men. They're soft men. And they start to make mistakes. And you see a lot of these mistakes being made right now in Gaza. These guys aren't that good. You know who's good? Hamas, especially the frontline brigades or combat units. They're very good, very physically fit, motivated. There's a video making the rounds right now that looks to be accurate. It shows a 2-man anti-tank crew coming out of one of the tunnels coming up. They run up to one of the Merkava tanks. The cojones on this guy, and he's saying sort of the Arabic death prayer because he's expecting not to make it. But he runs up to the tank and he places an explosive device on the tank, not to destroy the tank, but to destroy the protective system, because the tanks have these radars and these reactive devices, so that if you shoot an anti-tank round at it, it detects that movement and then blows shotgun shells, buckshot this way to set off the shaped charge, so that when it hits, it's not taking out the tank. So they went in, placed that by hand right where it needed to be placed to blow up that system, the trophy system, I think it's called. And then the other guy came out and popped it with the anti-tank system. I mean, those are big brass, whats, man. I mean, that's something. And these guys are smart enough to know what they have to do. They've clearly practiced this before, and now they're executing it flawlessly. Now, I'm sure that there's a bunch of guys that tried this and didn't make it. I'm sure, because these guys had the go cam, so we're watching the team that made it. I guarantee you, there's 100 dead Hamas fighters, guys who crawled out of a hole and started running towards a tank to be detected by the Israelis, and they got machine gunned down. They're not supermen, they're not immortal, but there's a lot of them, and they are very aggressive, and they know what they're doing. Israel is moving into their territory. The Israeli troops are scared. Look, again, another video. Hamas sends out a drone with, like you see all the time out of Ukraine, with the grenade dangling below it, and it comes in. There's an Israeli unit that's cleared out of space. Now, I don't know what the hell. This is a combat zone. So even if you don't expect a drone to fly over, mortars. I mean, come on, guys, but they're all clustered together in the middle having lunch. They're all like sitting there together. Dude, you should be dug in facing outward. One or two men per hole, spacing, cover, so that if they get a lucky round in, you only lose two guys. Said they're all gumped up there. Had the grenade been 5 meters to the left, they would have killed a whole bunch more people. As it is, it landed, took down about 8 of them. Professional soldiers don't do that. Professional soldiers don't behave. The Israelis right now are reservists. They're fat guys who have come off of a couple years out of the military. They've now been called back up. They don't want to be there. They're not trained for this. They're not physically fit for this. They're not mentally prepared for this. And they're getting ready to enter into a fight that only the strongest can survive. The Israeli Defense Force just is not a very good unit. And Hamas is good. You know who's better? Hezbollah. And if Hezbollah decides to engage, I don't think people picked up on what happened yesterday. Hezbollah, and the Israelis talked about it. Hezbollah released, I think, 4 different kinds of weapons yesterday that they've been holding on to. These are weapons that Israel can't stop. These are precision weapons. And they did it in a way that Israel knew about it, because the Israeli went, we're seeing things coming out of Hezbollah that we've never seen before, and it's scaring us to death because they're killing our guys and we can't stop it. This is a weapon we can't stop. We're not prepared for this. We've never expected this. And if you think if Hezbollah is just doing that, how many more of those do they have? New weapons that Israel's not ready for. And the Hezbollah fighters are they're better trained than the Hamas fighters. Israel's in a lot of trouble because their army just isn't that good. And once the mythology of Israeli invincibility is burst, it's over.
Yeah. And there's a lot to be said, as you were describing the battle-hardened skills and spirit of an organization like Hezbollah and even Hamas, both of which have been fighting protracted wars for quite a long time, while the IDF has been fighting, as you said, in a very different way. And it really is not looking good for Israel. But I wanted to also talk about this regional war. So you're talking about Hezbollah. You mentioned Iran. There's a lot of pressure on countries around the world, and especially in that region. Where do you see this going I know that you said that Hezbollah face a lot of pressure, but I don't think it's a guarantee that they will enter in full force.
I agree. Yeah.
Where do you see this going exactly? Because I agree with you in terms of Hamas's purpose. I don't think was to eliminate or eradicate Israel. I don't think that was really ever in the cards, given just the state of things for Palestine. But at the same time, this has been a long-standing problem historically. This is a long historical problem, many, 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 many decades since 1948, arguably. How does this end? Biden's talking about a pause. There's a lot of pressure on the United States. The European states are all over the place. Lots of divides there. How do you see this ending?
Well, I've spent all day researching and writing an article that I hope to get published tomorrow. That's about basically the escalation ladder, and I'll just talk about, because I find it fascinating, but I'm a nerd, so what the hell. But your standard single prong escalation ladder basically is logical, meaning that you start down here in peace, you finish up here in war, and it's just it's the steps to take to advance. What has to happen in terms of provocation? What makes you move from a peaceful thing to a prepared stance? Something had to trigger that. Then what would it take to prepare you to being even more prepared, then to preempt, and then to be in full scale war? How do you run up that escalation ladder? But that very rarely happens. You very rarely get the single strand. Oftentimes you get multiple strands, and a lot of times they use this in business. For instance, you have people talking about global warming and climate change policy, and then so you can't just say what is our strategy for oil, because you need, as your strategy for oil progresses, it impacts your strategy for nuclear energy, which impacts your strategy for renewable energy, and so the three things have to coordinate with each other. And that's what we're looking at right now. We have Hamas, Hezbollah, Iran. Now, there's each one of those can break down to different. For instance, Hamas, Hezbollah, but Hezbollah isn't just Hezbollah, because when we speak of the Lebanese border, there's a Lebanese Hamas out there. They just fired some weapons today. They're hooking and jabbing. The Palestinian Islamic Jihad is operating out of Lebanon. There's other Palestinian factions operating out of Lebanon, and Hezbollah is trying to control them. So even within Hezbollah, there's different ladders going up. Iran, they deal with the Syrian and Iraqi Shia militias, which are responsive to Iran, but also the Houthi. And we just saw the Houthi just decide the hell with it. They went, screw it, we're going to war, launch the missiles. And Iran's going, what? Don't launch the missiles. Don't launch the missiles, because you just screwed up my escalation ladder. I'm sitting here because Iran's talking to the United States. You know this. The Iran foreign minister came to New York. Okay, there were conversations, direct conversations, the kind of conversations that have to take place, which is, hey, guys, Israel screwed up. Right now, I got a whole bunch of screaming memes in Syria and Iraq that are screaming for your blood, and they're going to get it. Now, the question is, how are you going to respond? Because we're going to try and slow them down, but we can't stop them. There has to be a pressure relief valve. The pressure relief valve is they're going to get to fire some drones and rockets against your bases. You're going to take casualties. So you get to bomb our stuff, and we're going to take casualties. This is how we're going to control. We're going to work our escalation up here, but we're doing it in a way to relieve pressure, not increase pressure. It's a pressure relief system, which works until the Houthi starts firing rockets. Now the Americans have to start shooting that down and change the equation, and now you see the escalation go up, but it wasn't intended to go up. And now Hezbollah is sitting there going, damn it, they're out there, hooking and jabbing in the deserts of Syria and Iraq, and we're here. We got to start. And Hezbollah is working with Iran to communicate through their various channels to both Israel, because Hezbollah has a direct line with the Israelis. They have a direct line with Israel. I'm just telling you right now, they do. And Hezbollah is telling the Israelis, we're going to kill about 40 of you guys the next week, and you're going to kill about 50 of our guys, and we're just going to let it hang with there, okay? We don't want this thing to get out of control. We're going to limit the battlefield here, limited scope, escalation ladder. Meanwhile, Hamas is out there doing their thing, and Israel overreacts by blowing up a refugee camp. Boom! Enraged people more. Now you got to bring the escalation ladder up even more to relieve the pressure, because that's all this is. It's a pressure relief system, and you keep increasing the pressure. And this is where we're at right now. A very, very dangerous system. You know, the United States is deploying, in the process of deploying 2 aircraft carriers, a Marine Amphibious Readiness Group, a whole bunch of ships off the coast. You guys, I hope everyone understands that's nothing. Literally, it's zero combat power. Scott, they have hundreds of airplanes. Yeah, so what? What are they going to do? You think the United States are going to fly multiple combat sorties against Hezbollah? Because the second they do that, Iran gets involved. And you know what isn't going to happen? America's not going to beat Iran. Can't happen. Donald Trump tried to flex that muscle. Remember when they shot down the RQ-4 Global Hawk? And Trump was saying, we got to strike the Iranian defense systems. And the Pentagon went up to him and said, boss, you do that, and the escalation ladder kicks in. And what's going to happen is you're going to hit them, they're going to hit us. Now, you're going to get pissed because when they hit us, they're going to sink a ship. And when they sink a ship and you got 300 dead sailors, you're going to say, hit them hard. And when you hit them hard, you're going to say, hit their oil. Then they're going to hit Saudi Arabian oil. And then it's all over because the economy sunk. And now we're in a general war with Iran, and we don't have the troops to do that. It's going to take us 9 to 12 months just to generate this power. Now we got to move the power overseas into the Middle East. This ain't Desert Storm. We don't have ports that are going to receive us without fire. The Iranians are going to be taking out the ports, sinking the ships, blowing up the airfields. 900,000 men is what it's going to take, and even then there's no guarantee of victory. We know this because we've been through this before. It's not like, you know, Joe Biden is going, hey, what happens if we go to war against Iran? It was just a couple of years ago, and the Pentagon goes, we got the answer to that one, boss. We lose. So all this deployment of forces is purely for political show, for domestic political consumption, so Joe Biden can say, I'm doing something, but he's doing nothing. It's all part of the game.
Thank you for tuning in to my latest video. I appreciate all of your support. This channel, however, needs your help. I am seeking to make this channel more sustainable in the long term and upgrade necessary equipment to ensure that this work continues onward and makes progress to give you all of the geopolitical analysis that you all deserve. For that reason, I'm asking you to become a member of my Patreon community at patreon.com/DannyDhaiphong. You can find that link in the video description or in the pinned comment below. For whatever amount you choose to give, just know you are supporting independent media that you can't find anywhere else. Thank you so much, and I look forward to the next video.